victories and a lot of press in the process. But even as she'd planned Tiny's defense, she'd suffered pangs of guilt. She'd been assailed by doubts. That's why she'd run to Rose Cottage before the trial had begun. It had been eating at her even then. Not that she'd wanted to say it aloud, or even allow the thought to form. She'd wanted to go right on believing in Tiny, because she had to, in order to live with herself. In retrospect, she knew she should have quit the case the moment she'd had that first niggling doubt. But somehow, winning had become more important than anything else, and she'd known she could win. Now that the truth was out, she was sick of the law, sick of her own ability to twist it for her client's benefit. Her self-respect was in tatters. How had her life come to this? This victory tarnished all the others. All the cases she'd been proud to win. All the cases that had earned her a full partnership at her law firm in record time. Heartsick, she'd been locked away in her apartment for nearly 24 hours now, refusing to answer the phone, refusing to go to the door. She'd given a brief press conference, declaring that she was stunned after the debacle in the courtroom, then gone into hibernation to avoid the inevitable media frenzy over that disturbing courtroom spectacle. Right now, she couldn't imagine ever showing her face again. But realistically, she knew that the desire to hide would eventually pass. She was a fighter by nature. She just wasn't ready for battle quite yet. She needed time to lick her wounds in private. Unfortunately, her sisters all had keys to her place, and not 5 minutes ago, they'd arrived en masse to offer her comfort and support. Ashley appreciated the gesture, but it was wasted. She'd gotten a murderer off scot-free, and she was going to have to live with that for the rest of her life. It pretty much made a shambles out of the pride she'd always taken in her success. "It's not your fault," her sister Jo said quietly, once they were all seated with coffee that Maggie had brewed from the gourmet beans she'd taught them all to appreciate. "You were doing your job." "A hell of a job, isn't it?" Ashley said grimly, lifting her coffee cup in a mocking toast. "Stop it," Maggie ordered irritably. Maggie and Melanie had driven up from Virginia the minute they'd heard what happened in the courtroom the day before. They'd picked up Jo on their way into downtown Boston. Ashley had little doubt that they'd planned this gathering down to the last detail on the ride over. They were seated in Ashley's penthouse apartment, with its expensive modern art on the walls and its sweeping panorama of the Boston skyline outside. At the moment, none of it meant a thing to Ashley, not even the loyal support of her sisters. Loyalty was a D'Angelo family trait. They would have been here for her, no matter what she'd done. "Jo's right. You were doing your job," Melanie said emphatically. "Not everyone who says they're innocent is. Not everyone who's accused is guilty. And everyone is guaranteed a right to a complete defense and a fair trial." How often had she said exactly that? Ashley wondered. She had believed it, too. But knowing that she'd been responsible for putting a violent, totally amoral man back on the streets made her sick. Having been validated by numerous acquittals from juries, Ashley had gotten used to believing she was always right. She'd grown comfortable looking at the law and its loopholes more intently than the crime and its victims. Maybe that was sound law and a solid defense tactic, but she was beginning to question whether it had anything at all to do with justice. "The man made a complete fool of me," Ashley told her sisters. "How am I ever supposed to trust my own judgment again?"